and Poland. As the participants from Romania are used to, we are doing every year a debate linked with the index. So this year we thought that it will be interesting to go beyond our country and to try to see where we are, where is Romania at the moment, comparing with our neighbors. And always since 1990s, as you know, we looked to our neighbors, and Poland and Hungary were always examples for us. Just to name some, for instance, with our Hungarian colleagues, we worked for 1%, then 2% law. That is now a very important source of funding for NGOs. We looked to Polish legislation and Hungarian legislation when we came up with the Ordinance 26 for associations and foundations in 2000. We looked very carefully, at least FDSC, CSDF, for the public benefit status, and Poland was always one of the models that we looked for. Then when we went into the EU, always we looked how civil society it's feed through the structural funds, and also in terms of legislation, we worked with the Poles on cooperatives. We had some exchanges. But what we put together, CSDF and Stefan Batory from Poland and Ökotárs in Hungary, it was the Norwegian fund, so-called, because we were operating and we are operating, some of us, those funds. So the thing started to work very well because of these funds, and we are talking with each other very often. And not talking with each other, but the times changed. We are not in 90s and 2000 when everything went just on the good side. Now it's not the case. It's civil society. It's now, let's say, attacked in some of the countries. Blamed as being a foreign agent, or not being enough patriotic, or being representing Soros. And all these narratives are actually common in all the countries, not in the three that are now on this debate. And at a certain moment, we decided that we should go beyond our borders and find more solidarity and defend, you know, among ourselves. And it was a good experience with Hungary when Orban government started the attack towards NGOs, with Poland, with Romania, 3 years of harassment that we had based on the anti-corruption legislation and the loan association and foundations. So it was a difficult times lately. We think that it will be difficult also in the next years to come. And that's why it's important to discuss with each other and to try to find solutions and to help each other. And some of the issues are cyclical, or if will appear in Poland, for sure, our politicians, they will inspire from Poland if the Polish politician will be successful in restricting the civic space rights. So that's why it's important to stand for each other and to work together. And today we have two very, very important foundations with us from Central and Eastern Europe, and two friends and civil society activists. Veronika Mora from Ökotárs from Hungary. We know each other for many, many years, and it's not just you know, that we respect the work that you and your organization is doing, but also Veronika was always with good advices in key moments for our history with us. Anna Fedas from Poland. She's working very closely now with CSDF She's representing Batory Foundation, and in the last years we tried to put together the Central and Eastern Europe Forum based on what I said before, that it's important to meet, to talk, and to find solution together, and to have this solidarity in Central and Eastern Europe. And I will give them briefly now the mic in order to update us shortly about the situation in their country. And I will start with Vera for a minute or so. So Vera, what's the situation in Hungary?
Well, thank you for this very flattering introduction, Ionuț. For those of us who don't know our foundation that well, Ökotárs, or the Hungarian Environmental Partnership Foundation, is an organization that is devoted to strengthen and support civil society in Hungary. But we also have collaborators all over the Central and Eastern European region. I was going to start with the advice, that you might have looked at Hungary in the 90s for good examples. Don't do that anymore. Probably everybody knows by now very well that Hungary experienced a very serious democratic backsliding over the last 10 years since the current government came into power, and that also affected civil society very heavily. The phenomenon of shrinking civil space was observed in the European Union first in Hungary, and was manifested in media attacks, in harassment by official agencies and authorities, and also most recently in the form of restrictive legislation. But I think I can come back to this more in detail later. But currently, Hungarian civil society is struggling in a very unfavorable environment.
Anna, Poland, it was on our news very often mentioned last weeks. So Romanian media follow the restriction on abortion rights and the demonstration. So give us a hint about where you are now, where you're standing.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here and for the invitation. So in a nutshell, because I could talk for ages about the situation, I'm very like we are consulting and also like discussing this current issue all the time in our foundation, but also in our country among other organizations. So as you said, the proposal to ban the most terminations has triggered the largest ralliest in post-communist Poland has ever witnessed. So it was like a mass protest last weeks. And at the same time, the government is not coping with the pandemic. So at the same time, we have the increasing numbers of, and the most worrying situation when it comes to healthcare. And the organizers of the protest are now consulting, trying to create a plan for getting out of the situation. But at the same time, they don't have a partner and in the government. So there is like only one side dialogue inside the group of NGOs interested in women's rights, and also like in the civic space in general. But unfortunately, only those who are was always on this more, let's say, a liberal side or like pro rule of law side. So it's like very, I would say, internal dialogue, and there is no so many hopes and chances that the situation will be changed. The announce of this constitutional tribunal is not published yet, so still the law is not there. But still, at the same time, it can be in every day. So it's also the it's not improving the situation anyhow. And at the same time today, despite ban, Europe's largest right-wing rally may go ahead. So probably you also heard about that each year on 11th of November in Warsaw, Warsaw hosts all right-wing organizations all around Europe together and also today we are expecting this march. So another, let's say, lessons that civil society in Poland has to take, because each year we didn't solve the situation and also didn't propose any other narration for this, how to celebrate this day in a more, let's say, common or integrating ways. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So our common issues, as I see from this intervention, is always the link of civil society and defending rule of law. And here at least we have European Union on our side, but they are also under pressure with passing the budget and the opposition of Poland and Hungary to link the European funds to the rule of law issue. Then all these conservatories coming on and on, like also we had in Romania this referendum for redefinition of the marriage in the constitution, and all other conservative topics that are also now in US as front lines in the debate. And I would say that the difficulties among civil society in staying together and fighting to all these narratives that are coming from conservatives and in extreme rights group. But now I would like to go further with the index, and I would like to ask my colleague Andrei Pop. Andrei, he is in charge with coordinating the work on the Romanian index. So I will ask Andrei for 10 minutes to tell us about the findings, and then he will invite our guests to comment a bit about the indexes in their countries to have some comparative analysis about where we stand. So Andrei,
thank you,
for yours.
And thank you, Vera and Dania, for being with us for this event. We're so honored to host you in Romania. Yeah, I'll be maybe take less than 10 minutes because, of course, many of us already know about the index. But we gotta go through a bit about the process for any new newly interested people joining us via Facebook. And thanks for your interest. So the index covers the calendar. The USAID Civil Society Organization Sustainability Index covers the calendar year 2019 because it's a rather complex process. It goes on in dozens of countries around the world, 24 countries in the regions, and other 50 in the rest of the world. So it's it kind of takes a long time to get all this data together and give it a final look for publishing. That's why, for instance, the report in Romania was ready by July, but the regional report was only ready in October, and that's why we sort of have a delayed launch. But what's the index good for? It's a super cool tool for measuring the overall viability of the civil society sector, following a very clear and properly implemented methodology. So we can track the evolution of this viability in each country and in between countries across a large period of time. Basically, that's the most important added value. How does it work? First of all, I stand here for a larger team in FDSC, in my organization that looks into these topics all across the year. But also, I stand here on behalf of a local expert panel group, whom I very much thank, and who score the evolutions from year to year in the civil society sustainability across 7 dimensions of sustainability. If you want to have a look at the reports, our USAID colleagues developed a very interesting and useful website, CSOSI.org, where you can find each of the country reports, the regional reports, but you can also find a data explorer so that you can see how each country evolved across time. So basically, with each report, we try to identify whether or not we have improvements or deterioration of the civil society situation. Just have to warn you that the scale is a bit counterintuitive. The lower the score, the better the performance of that country actually is. Let me just quickly share my screen and show you, for instance, the Romanian reports. The reports are not very long, 8 to 9 pages. They're a pretty good read for anybody who's interested to give them a deeper look. But basically, the dimensions we are scoring each year are these ones. Overall CSO sustainability in Romania is 3.7 on the scale from 1 to 7. So the closer you are to 1, the better your civil society sector performs. We are at an average of 3.7 with these variations across dimensions. Just as a bit of an introduction for what's happening in Romania, we are, the general civil society background was that starting late 2016 until 2019, we had a bit of a horror story for civil society because we had a very proficient government trying to not only attack civil society discursively, but and through conspiracy theories, but also with very practical attempts to disable the civil society major means of operating and action. This was largely because throughout 2016, for any politician or decision maker in Romania, it had largely became very clear that civil society wasn't a very important voice, especially after a long range of civic protests demanding not just a clean environment for Roșia Montana, but a general cleanup of the political elites in Romania. In 2016, it had been super obvious that civil society was a strong actor. Some civil society leaders went into politics, which of course made civil society into a very, very good scapegoat in the electoral campaigns back then. So the past few years, civil society had it very rough. As I was saying, you can find details in the reports. But what happened in 2019, the year covered by the report, things pretty much changed because of 2 rounds of elections, which said people can no longer take the pressures of a populistic government, which is actually explaining the main conclusion of the 2019 CSOSI report, that the civil society organization's advocacy abilities improved slightly. That's basically the only change that we are registering throughout 2019, and this is largely due to a slight improvement in the relationship between civil society and government at large. This relation had been tarred by lack of transparency, conspiracy theories, as I had been telling you, so on and so forth, which were pretty much systemic issues, plus direct attacks on topics which were super important for civil society organizations, such as the independence of justice, which was a permanent fight by most civil society in between these years, starting 2017. So we had this improvement, and also the report takes a good pictures of the problems that are still there, and we've been calling attention upon in the past years. Which the troubles with the legislation, the very unclear money laundering directive transposal legislation, the civil society organization's difficulty to retain paid staff, especially with the increasing wages in the public sector, and as again, as horizontal points of weakness that we are usually considered, we have problems. We are seeing problems related to civil society constituencies who are not large enough or strong enough in order to support civil society organizations when under attack by malevolent governments, so to say. Of course, the insufficiency of funds dedicated to the variety of activities, and the major problems in terms of transparency, transparency of public information. What's been very positive in the past few years in the Romanian civil society sector is an improvement, a tightening of the relationships between the business sector and civil society, especially around the issues of rule of law. So lastly, a very interesting evolution from 2019 was that the media rhetoric, particularly media rhetoric, accusing civil society organizations of acting as foreign agents, was gradually replaced with a rhetoric against the resist concept, which was a slogan for many of the protests in the last few years. So, and in a lot of political speeches, resist has become basically a go-to scapegoat for anything that is evil and that wants evil for our country, when in fact it's actually just a civic concept. But yes, I don't know if Mr. Soros is online, but at least his name got some competition for in the main discourses by Romanian politicians. So that's pretty much it for now. We'll come back to Romania later, of course. Thanks.
Vera, would you like to continue with Hungary?
Yes, thank you. Maybe it would be interesting to see the comparison
Yes.
in this course. Andrei, if you could maybe show them.
You're right. You're perfectly right, Vera, because we have prepared a comparison between the scores for our countries starting 2014, because that's after 2014, pretty much a lot of dramatic things started happening. So you see, as I was telling you, the lower the score on the top of the screen, the better the performance. Poland fares best throughout all these years, has the highest scores, even if the scores are decreasing constantly since 2015. Poland goes to 2.7, and Romania and Hungary pretty much intertwined, while Hungary in blue was doing clearly better than Romania in 2015. Things shifted a bit. What's interesting on the Romanian side is that you can see an improvement between 2015 and 2016. Especially because of what I was telling you previously about this increasing vigor of the civic-minded individuals taking to the streets, advocating for what they want, anti-corruption, new political class, until 2016, and since 2016, Romania and Hungary are decreasing together. But yes, I'll let you, Vera and Anya, tell us more about what the reports tell us interesting about your country's USAID reports. And maybe Anya, I wanted to ask about the fact that you're so high up with the score. Do you feel this I don't know, strength of the institutions or of the environment? Is it keeping you safer than the rest of us, even if you do have dramatic phenomena?
Shall I start?
Sure. Or
I just felt called to answer you. So very quickly on the report. So of course, congratulations to the initiator and the researcher for finding these cases, and very detailed cases, and referring to the rule of law, the new procedures, legislations, underlining the fact that there was no debate on the new, for example, registered system for NGO, or tax system for civil society organizations, which also is the result of many problems that civil society organizations have to struggle. When it comes to the things that keeps us still strong somehow, as you answered, is of course the fact that we still have huge support from the European Union money, and many also civil society organizations are delivering the public services, and are also in a huge cooperations with local governments that are now a huge help in the times of this, the polarization and the fight and the war that is now with the current government. What I wanted to also quickly underline or highlight is that the political conflict that we have now in Poland is resonating, is unfortunately entered the civil society sector. So now the internal conflicts in the also sometimes personal is influenced by the political conflict, and that is under also the reason why there is no a strong voice. The strong voice of civil society sector is not so heard or prepared yet. So we still have this to be done. At the same time, I appreciate that the reports showed that the fact that still there is some kind of initiatives, grassroots initiatives taken by organizations, also when it comes to LGBT ideology-free zones. I think that's also a good sign that that even though this threats civil society, there are, especially sometimes locally, that they tend to build strong coalitions. And of course, and very huge problem is the way the public call for proposals from the public money are organized, and it's also written in the report that the organizations well connected with the government, I mean the current ruling party, are now receiving money for for example, human rights issues, and not having barely no experience in that field. That means that many public services, for example, domestic violence or child law and other, won't be served in a way that it should be. So it's not only the case of the fair distribution of the public money to the civil sector, but it's also the case of the receiver, the final receiver of this grant. I mean the citizens who don't have the equal access to the services like legal advice, free of charge legal advices, or other public services that. Thank you very much.
Vera?
Yes, thank you. Well, I think this chart speaks for itself. You can see that by now Hungary is unfortunately the negative example, scores lowest, not only in these three countries, but all EU member states that are covered by the report. And these low scores is a result of a steady decline over the last 7-8 years. If you went back a bit more in time, you would be able to see that this decline has already started in 2012-13. And in the first major attack of civil society organizations have taken place in 2014 and 15, and focused on the NGO program of the EEA Norway grants, which at the time my foundation and our partners have managed. The first attack on this program was accusations by the government that the EEA grants are used for political purposes and mismanaged and fraudulently distributed. This was not only in the form of media attacks, but also harassing inspections and criminal accusations, all of which were proven to be absolutely groundless. But this also led to a situation that, unlike you two, my foundation is not a manager of the EEA and Norway grants NGO program right now, because the Hungarian government have not yet concluded the agreement with the donor countries. Over the last 5 years, not only the hostile media environment and the pro-government propaganda's narratives contributed to this declining trend, but a major milestone was 2017, when the Hungarian government initiated and approved, or the parliament has passed a new law on so-called foreign funded organizations, which obliged NGOs that receive funding from abroad above a certain threshold to register themselves as foreign funded organizations and wear this label. This led in 2017 also to quite large protests from civil society, and contributed to creating the so-called Civilization Coalition, which is a cooperation of major civil society organizations to defend themselves and act in solidarity in the face of new governmental attacks. You can also see that compared to the previous years, which show a steady decline, 2019 was a fairly, let's say, quiet year for Hungarian civil society. So while the existing trends continued, the situation did not markedly worsen last year. As a positive sign, we've seen a bit of an improvement on the advocacy dimension, especially because of the events around the local elections that took place in Hungary in October, and which brought quite surprising successes of the opposition, also in Budapest and its districts, some major towns, but also in smaller towns and villages. And civil society had an unprecedented mobilization prior to these elections to encourage people to vote, to prevent voting frauds, and also, especially in smaller places, to run candidates for the local assemblies or the local mayors. This has given civil society organizations a glimmer of hope. The local successes have shown that organizing locally by community groups and organizations can lead to successes and can empower people to participate and to influence local matters. Otherwise, in terms of the legal environment and in terms of public image, as I said, the trends of the previous years have continued, so restrictive legislation remained in place. Pro-government media accused civil society organizations, particularly human rights organizations, as being part of the Soros network. And also, as regards the financial situation, we can see a very strong imbalance, meaning an abundance of money on the one side and starving civil society organizations on the other. Of course, the latter affecting mostly human rights organizations, LGBTI and women's groups. So as I said, 2019 was relatively quiet, but quiet in a quite a low scale or a low level, which resulted in the decline of the previous years.
Thank you. I just changed the screen share to show you all what I was talking about earlier, CSOSI.org. So it allows you to see data series with these data, with those civil society scores per country. You can also get, of course, detailed information about them and download the reports, all the annual reports for whichever country you're interested in. Sorry, Ionuț.
Thank you, Andrei. So one of the interesting moves in Hungary and Poland, it was the fact that the governments were successful in putting together quite rich in terms of money funds available for civil society. And we always look at it as dangerous because basically they wanted to have their own resources linked with the ideology in order to buy civil society. And I remember that 2 or 3 years we had a meeting in the Romanian, we were invited by Romanian government to listen to the head of this fund from Poland, Freedom Foundation something, to explain us, you know, how nice is the Polish government toward the civil society, putting a large amount of money in projects. But we immediately, based on the question that we addressed, we perceived the real actually role of this fund, you know, in order to build and sustain their own uncivil civil society. And I think this was this is a big danger in our region, and we should fight for independence of this kind of funds coming from taxpayers' money at the end of the day. But we've been talking about 2019, so already we had some big events coming like COVID and some changes in the legislation in our countries. And I would like you now to ask what are the recent patterns of disabling civil society in our country. So what's the news? What came as a package with all these restrictions due to the COVID? I would be very keen and interested to see what's the direction, where we are going through. So who would like to start from the three of you? Vera, please.
Maybe I could start because I would also like to reflect on what you just said about large-scale state funding to civil society. I really agree with you that this could also be dangerous and a means to sort of domesticate civil society and to make organizations less willing to speak up and to be vocal because of fearing for their funding and their money. After the change in the government in Hungary in 2010, the government prepared a new non-profit act, which otherwise was quite acceptable, except for one thing. They reorganized the decision-making structure of the existing National Civil Fund. They also renamed this into National Cooperation Fund. Earlier, elected civil society delegates decided on the proposals for funding and on the distribution of grants. This was replaced by a system whereby 2/3 of the members of the decision-making bodies were directly delegated by the government. So this means that this fund, which supports the operating costs of civil society, is now under direct governmental control. But also most recently this year, the government introduced a new rural civil fund targeting organizations working in villages, in small places under 5,000 inhabitants. Which also clearly shows that they want to create a basis of local organizations working in villages as their allies. And we also, maybe I could have mentioned it before, but the last couple of years trends very clearly show that the sector is divided into good and bad organizations by the government, both in terms of propaganda, but also in terms of funding. The good organizations are the ones that work on very traditional charity issues or on recreation or leisure time. And the bad organizations are everybody else, basically. So those that don't fit. And we see that there is a strong chilling effect, especially on organizations working in smaller rural locations, which are dependent on state and municipal funding. So those organizations that were directly attacked, the major human rights groups, for example, they could even become stronger as a result of the attack. They had an unwanted visibility and publicity, which they could bank on, also in terms of donations and crowdsourcing. But the organizations that are smaller and weaker, working in the countryside, became much more cautious and much more reluctant to engage in larger networks or in advocacy because of fearing the potential repercussions. Coming to this year, of course, in Hungary, just like everywhere else, it was dominated by the coronavirus pandemic. In Hungary, first restrictions, first lockdown was introduced in mid-March. But what we've seen, this left vulnerable groups of society totally unprepared. So the rural poor, Roma, homeless, people living with disabilities received practically no support from the central government. And helping them was left to the local municipalities and to civil society organizations. And it was quite obvious that civil society groups were really first respondents in terms of supporting the vulnerable groups left alone by the central government through collecting and distributing donations, to supporting and helping digital education, providing information, providing legal aid. The Civilization Coalition has conducted a survey among its broader membership in May. And out of 85 civil society organizations that responded, 40% reported that they started new activities directly responding to the crisis, the kinds of activities that I was just mentioning before. And also we've seen a large surge in private donations, in crowdsourcing. So the major crowdsourcing platform of civil society, Ionuț, has reported an 18-fold increase in April compared to the previous year. But at the same time, the government also used the previous lockdown period and also the new lockdown period, which came into effect just today. So we used these to push through legislation that had nothing to do with mitigating the crisis, but further weaken rule of law and contribute to anti-democratic trends. For example, in spring, one amendment banned legal gender recognition, hitting the transgender community in Hungary. And of course, it's quite hard to make any links to the coronavirus. And currently, yesterday, the Minister of Justice introduced proposed amendments to the Constitution, to the Parliament, when at the same time, as I said, we have a new lockdown period just in force as of today. Thank you.
Thank you, Vera. I would be very interesting to see, to know if organizations that were critical towards government in critical areas like human rights, rule of law, were applying for these public funds, and if some of them they succeeded or all are rejected, because this was one of the questions that I put to the Polish director. He told me that it's independent, and I say when I will see organizations working in the area of LGBT anti-discrimination, Istanbul Convention, rule of law funded by this national fund, then that will be the ultimate proof that this fund is independent and is not linked with the ideology that your government is promoting. So Anna, what's the status in your country? And Vera, if you want to comment afterwards on this or now, please feel free to do it.
Vera, would you like to comment now, or
yeah. Or Eva or Vera?
Yes, thank you. Actually, to answer your questions, first of all, the major human rights organizations, such as the Hungarian Civil Liberties Union, as a rule, don't request state funding from the Hungarian government. However, there is experience from other organizations, such as LBGTI organizations, that earlier have applied to the National Civil Fund, and they regularly got rejected. Or maybe they got funding once or twice as kind of a flow in the system, let's say. But generally, first of all, it is quite difficult to get information out of this new civil fund. But some investigative journalists took the efforts and have shown a couple of maybe 2 or 3 consecutive years how the majority of the funding goes to civil society organizations that are chaired by pro-government figures or local councilmen related to the governing party, etc., etc. So the bias is very clearly there. There is also a new development related to funding where the Hungarian government has a say. I should have mentioned this among this year's developments is that the foreign-funded, the legislation, the Act on Foreign-Funded Organizations of 2017 has earlier been taken to the European Court of Justice by the European Commission because they said it goes against EU legislation. And this June, the court has taken its decision and ruled that the foreign-funded legislation does go against or is in breach of EU legislation on several counts, including the freedom of assembly and the freedom of movement of the capital within Europe. This was really a very important decision for us, and this would oblige the Hungarian government to repeal this law. However, instead of repealing this law, what they did is that the national agency that manages Erasmus program in Hungary started demanding applicants a declaration whether they conform with this foreign-funded legislation in September after the court's ruling. So, and also at the same time, the leadership of this agency was changed. With government, and the new director is a clearly government-friendly figure now. So even EU funding managed by Hungarian authorities is increasingly controlled, and increasingly critical organizations are excluded.
So as a conclusion, they went beyond controlling the taxpayer money from Hungary. They are trying to control also EU money, although we have a clear decision in European court against this practice. This is really tough one. So Anna, what's the status in Poland in concerning this tumultuous year?
Thank you very much. so very quickly answering your question. So the program, the calls for proposals organized by this agency, governmental agency responsible for civil society, it's organized like mostly for scouting organizations, or as Veronika said, that's more traditional types of distributing like public support or charity, for example. So that's why a few just organizations focus more like in general cases like civil societies or I don't know, the public democracy education or civil society organization deliver this kind of funding for publications or programs or training, which is okay, but still it's not that, as you said, the good proof for being independent or being fair would be also to support directly human rights organizations or directly organizations supporting minorities, like, for example, refugees or migrants. So it's not there, unfortunately. And also like, of course, you can always say that we have Active Citizens Fund, like we are fund of one of the organizations from consortium operating this program from the European economic area, but still it shouldn't be like each organization has each program, so it's not the way that civil sector would like to have. When it comes to the current patterns, I prepared for, let's say, main challenges, or that would be maybe interesting for Romanian organizations to follow, but also like maybe to expect when it comes to the this idea of like changing the civic sector or building the new civil sector idea like the Polish government has now. So first is the lack of or insufficient financial and infrastructural support to continue their activity and cover cost of salaries, rent, employees, insurance, etc. When it comes, of course, to the COVID-19 outbreak. So as you read, the patterns, trends described in the report are still there. Plus, we have now this year the pandemic situation, which changed a lot when it comes to civil society organizations' possibilities to continue their work. So when it comes to these measures to so-called anti-crisis shield, unfortunately, barely no recommendations from civil society side were added to this legislations, these procedures, even though very quickly organizations prepared a list of needed support. So only social enterprises could receive and can still receive financial support from the state. And when it comes to the governmental support directly to civil society organizations, there is the €2 million program operated by this agency I mentioned before, so the National Institute of Freedom, and which is a tiny drop when compared to the need of 120,000 civil society organization sector. And of course, there is still the concern, like with the last call for proposals, that the support will reach mostly those NGOs which fit the ruling party agenda. Fortunately, and hopefully some municipalities designed local public support programs, but their aid is dedicated mostly to local businesses, not always answer civil society organizations' needs. And unbalanced funding resources for civil society organizations means that they are mostly sometimes based on the local grants from local governments. And this year, because last year we also had, which wasn't mentioned in the report, but it's very important, education and reform, which was very badly made. And that's why the local governments won't have any money this year to support civil activity. And those who have, they will have to, of course, dedicate this money to support for businesses or to just do COVID-19 issues. Second challenge would be the inability to continue current activities, services, projects. Also, when it comes to the situation with that business has, so those who are based on local governments, and I mentioned that they won't have this support. Those who were those civil society organizations that were based on the support from the businesses, based on this civil, for example, business responsibility programs, won't have again because of the hard situation of business. And the only hope is the public, like funding from individuals, which is now on rise in Poland. So this is like a new hope, that's a new trend to support, but only a few aware citizens is now eager to regularly fund their favorite organizations, for example, on independent media or cultural organizations. But it's more the awareness is rising, so that would be a new hope for the support for civil sector. When it comes to abuses, the third case would be the abuses of power by public administration government. So first, of course, very well-known case was the outstanding example, recent nomination of Polish civil society organizations representatives to the European Economic and Social Committee, to which Polish government delegated a list of nominees disregarding the recommendation of Public Benefit Council and Federation of Polish civil society organizations. That's one case. Then second it's like a very recent one. So it refers to the ombudsman. So the term of office of the current ombudsman, Adam Bodnar, expired at the beginning of September this year. And despite the COVID-19 outbreak, Polish civil society organizations community managed to select a social candidate for the ombudsman office, Zuzanna Radzińska-Bluszcz. She managed to gain the support of over 1,000 civil society organizations, which is, like I would say in Poland, like a huge success. But unfortunately, her candidacy was rejected by by Polish Parliament, and where the majority of seats, of course, are held by politicians from the ruling party. So second month now, because we have now the 11th of November, Polish citizens do not have any institutional protection of their citizens' rights. So still we are waiting for the next term or next discussion on the ombudsman.
I'm sorry, Anya, and Bodnar didn't want to run again?
It's not. It's also. It's not only his decision, but also like this was like a, let's say, tradition to change it. Like and yeah, and he wanted also, like, because he was also the candidate of NGOs last time, but not 1,000. This is like a but he wants to focus on the like a scientific work, but also like he wanted to give a place. But I think that is also like the ritual that each time it should be like someone also like selected by the civil society organizations community, or it should be like this. And from time to time we hear about new ideas who would be the candidate ruling party, and unfortunately these candidates are not let's say known for the protection of human rights or like citizens' rights. And that's the third challenge. And the fourth would be something that also Veronika mentioned, like this this fight, this war with civil society organizations, and this splitting them into those good ones who are like cooperating with the current government and those who are like rejected on the dark list and blacklist. Or so those who are, of course, not respected, but also from time to time we hear like a negative like Polish public media, they produce like a negative programs or materials or like a text on them. Those are of course those organizations that promote civic activism in public sphere, independent culture, which is now this kind of organizations also, because of this lack of support from the local government, they are really in huge danger and when it comes to their continuation of the work. Independent journalism and civic media, those organizations in defense of women and kids' rights, including measures to counteract gender-based violence and domestic violence, ethnic, national, sexual minorities' rights, animal rights, environmental protection, watchdog advocacy activities, support to refugees and migrants.
So basically everything that could have a word, a stand against the government ideology, the government policy. And I think this is, it's common for these governments, and as you rightly pointed, they're trying to domesticate a civil society, and civil society that cannot be domesticated should be destroyed, or, you know, have campaigns against that, the support among citizens to diminish quite a lot. And I think this is also the case with the citizens, looking to the narrative. You know, every citizen who stands or who doesn't vote with those parties, they are stamped as elitist, or they are stamped like liberals, too liberals, or they are you know, stamped as egoist people, that they don't care about other people, that they don't succeed financially or in their jobs as the others. So this split is done also in the society at large. And I remember Eva, Veronika, like, I don't know, 5 years ago, together with Eva from the director from Stefan Batory, when we went to the parliament one day, to the Libe committee, and we tried to advocate for European Values Instrument Fund. Now it's called Rights and Values Fund. And I think this was a successful initiative of our foundation, where we were led by Stefan Batory. And I think this is one areas where civil society that is now blamed, that is now, you know, thrown into the corner, would get the resources and the backing of the European Union in order to continue a fight for values. Because at the end of the day, we are talking here about the values of European Union, the pillars, the values are the pillar of this construction. And I think this is an important, let's say, optimism that we get from European Union with this kind of programs, and with the courts that are rejecting, the European courts that are rejecting all these trends. But now, very quickly, Andrei, before going to questions, because we have some questions from our viewers, give us also a brief about Romania, but try to keep it short.
Yeah, I'll keep it very short, basically, because I wanted to mention just two main points. And from the onset, I wanted to say that, well, a few years ago, we felt that Romanian civil society was very connected in terms of threats to the ones in Hungary and Poland, and we were about to reach the same types of problems as Hungary and Poland, we're clearly in a more comfortable situation now, as I was saying. But I wanted to point that I definitely don't think we're out of the deep waters yet. We have a more transparent government, but however, we're so far from being comfortable as civil society actors. Comfortable as in dealing with a government that has a certain appreciation for criticism from civil society, trying to make able to make it into something constructive. We don't have. We're not. I'm really not certain that we have such a government yet, and also a government that is that has its values clear in terms of human rights. So we're not safe yet from this point of view. But I said I just wanted to mention two synthetic but very problematic points from the last year. They're not so new, but they're only consolidated. So what's happening is that the politicians are very skilled in learning tactics from civil society and are starting to mimic more civil society tools and objectives only as an exercise for image, for improving their image and mimic consultation. We've seen in the past few years protests organized by the governing parties, human rights abuses called by governments themselves, while in the face of human rights organizations who were utterly debilitated. For instance, the previous governing party, during its campaign to maim the independent justice in Romania, used this argument of human rights abuses. They said they wanted to safeguard the human rights for the political convicts in Romanian prisons. So this is definitely a very serious trend that we see. Because the politicians are responding to civil society with their very own, with the same tactics, which is dangerous and difficult to explain in the eyes of the public. For instance, the current government also poses some concerns, especially because it includes in the highest echelons politicians who have been active supporters of the referendum trying to redefine family in the Romanian constitution, so as to exclude the LGBTI families, which is a problem in itself. So conservatives taking over the conservative opinions and actions, taking over the government, will be a very serious issue for civil society. Just yesterday, we had very clear news in this respect. One of the leaders of the governmental party said they would rather in the next government, because we're going to have a change of government in December. In the next government, they would prefer to cooperate more with a party that stands against migrants, that is very shaky on the European values, rather than with a progressive party, a smaller progressive party who has the values straight. As I was saying, at least the European values are straight there. But this governmental representative actually made it clear that they would rather go to the more conservative partner.
A conservative agenda, and we'll have, you mentioned the change of the government. This is due to the elections. Probably we'll have on 6th of December election. This will arrange for the next years also Romanian politics, and we'll see if this trend that started with the European election will continue or not in Romania. But the first question I received, Andrei, it's actually addressed to you.
I'm sorry, Ionuț, I had one more short point,
please.
A very short point about what's happening in Romania. So the second point was about the rise of alternative civil society, which is something very serious and we have to deal with. It's been happening for a while now. That civil society no longer means being an NGO, or being an NGO no longer automatically means that you are pro-human rights, pro-transparency, pro-rule of law. There are more and more NGOs who are called on this, or on the other hand, who are against these values, exactly to be on the side of the government finances, or on or on the side of the church, just like you were mentioning earlier. This is an increasing problem from Romania because the potential constituencies for civil society no longer know what to understand. And of course, the European structural funds help this because there is a set of non-governmental organizations who try to use the opportunity of large funds to just do that rather than have an actual civil society message. They are just running some funds and taking the opportunity. But yes, I'm done.
Some academics, they are calling this movement uncivilized civil society.
Yep.
Okay, so the first question is for you, Andrei, and somebody is asking, why do you think that the chapter on sectoral infrastructure dimension from Romanian report hasn't seen any change? So very brief.
Yeah, it hasn't seen any change in a few years, but it doesn't say anything else, the question, right? It would have been good to give us your opinion about why it should have changed, because we're very open in getting opinions and collecting information when deciding. We have very long discussions with a panel of experts about how to change these scores. But basically, the score for each dimension results out of discussions about things going for the better and things going for the worse. If I can talk of sectoral infrastructure, for instance, I can very easily say that in the past few years, it has become clear that we need more resource centers for all the more and more powerful civic groups and civic action. We are definitely too low on resource centers. But however, other positive things have happened in terms of sectoral infrastructure, and we always have to take those into account. So we're always sort of balancing out positive evolutions to the negative ones. The fact that I don't know, the existing resource centers have been starting to provide services in a more innovative way to cover more of the country, or the fact that we have an increasingly and stronger and stronger network of community foundations who are setting examples for local fundraising and solving local issues are on the positive side. So when dealing with these scores, we're always trying to balance stuff. But again, drop us an email if you have strong opinions of what should change in these scores. Maybe there's something that we didn't take into account. So we're very
okay. Thank you, Andrei. The second question is probably more for Vera and Anna. It concerns about the foreign agents, and the question is, if CSOs are viewed as foreign agents, what should foreign donors do? Stop funding, support CSO to build local fundraising and organizational capacity, but not program operation, and then pull out? Something else?
Well, if I may start, certainly not stop funding. To the contrary, and actually we see it happening. That major international philanthropic donors that have, after 2000, gradually pulled out of Central and Eastern Europe because our countries have become members of the European Union, are starting to come back and launch new programs precisely in response to the shrinking civil space that now we can also observe within the European Union. So new funding initiatives such as Civitates have been launched over the last couple of years. And I think it's also absolutely necessary. So what we see in Hungary, that some organizations, as I mentioned before, have been able to bank on the unwanted publicity that they received in the propaganda, and major human rights organizations did really scale up their efforts to collect funding in Hungary in the form of private donations and crowdsourcing. However, even in case of the Hungarian Civil Liberties Union, which is probably the most successful in this, I've just checked, about 1/4, 25% of their funding now comes from Hungarian private sources. The rest still comes from international philanthropic donors. And when I'm asked what civil societies in our countries really need, I usually say there are 4 C's. The 4 C's are coalition building, so tighten, to strengthen cooperation among civil society and solidarity among civil society organizations. Communication, to improve visibility, to explain better to people why civil society is important, what organizations do, how they benefit the society. So to improve positive image, positive communication. Constituency building, so to broaden the circle of supporters, members, donors in the countries. And last but not least, communities, to support grassroots organizing, local active citizenship, local mobilization for public participation, so that people, so that there is this basic grassroots bottom-up foundation of civil society out of which the organizations can grow out. So my advice to the donors would be to support coalition building, communication, constituencies, and communities. Thank you.
Anna?
Very good question. And also, like, we had like many discussions like this internal, how to like having grants. Also, like, we cooperate, for example, with Belarus, and that was also the case of what how to awaken the sleeping civil society. But now we can see that, like, with like constant supporting of civil society, it will pay back for sure, but you have to be patient. And also, so it's the example of Belarus that we observed, that all organizations that were supported for very many years, they are like there, and they are very actively supporting protests and very organizing themselves in a very quick way, even though they don't have these resources like we have. When it comes to a foreign agents index, in Poland, we the current government had this year this idea. It's frozen now. It's they don't proceed on that, but we can expect that one day we will have also this issue and this case and this idea once again in the debate. For sure, they use the public media to like also change the narration on the human rights organizations. But what we can do is also not to be all the time in the response, you know, for their initiatives or their campaigns anti civil society organizations. We should start our own campaigns also in local building, as Veronika said, building coalitions. For example, now in Poland, we have nice examples of coalitions of women rights organizations in the big cities with women rights organizations. Well, sometimes they are just grassroots initiatives, they are not established organizations in the rural areas. And that's the coalition that we should have, like not reach new audience and
not
also
elitists and liberals, and as they call it, to go exactly in the areas where they have the most supporter, rural areas, Eastern Poland. So yeah, I think
of course, also like to reach the unexpected audience, unexpected alliance, because we also like maybe it's also time to tell about our failures and maybe like moments that we a little bit overslept. So it's, for example, the situation that we were constantly cooperating with the same people, with the same audience target groups, and that were convinced already and were on our side, and also like a little bit like not taking care of those. And I have a few examples of projects that just focus on de-radicalization, so to reach the groups that are like, for example, this so-called sleeping majority, and they are like shifting based on the materials and media campaign that they reach. Sometimes it's on their governmental side, sometimes our side, but some very quickly we cross them out because sometimes we should go back to this kind of audience and to build this these coalitions, that's for sure. And for foreign donors, please don't still believe in us, and also don't and be more maybe sometimes patient and based and trust us, but also like encourage us a little to reach a new narration and reframing.
Veronika, you want to say something, please?
Yeah, maybe just to add on this, one thing that came to my mind is that bridging the gap between urban and rural civil society is certainly very important. And in order to be able to effective as a donor, it would be very useful or very important to work together with organizations, local organizations that have a close understanding of the local needs, the local circumstances and conditions in the various parts of a given country. So to create programs that are really adapted to what is possible and what is doable in a given location or a given region. So it would be good for donors to work together with such local agents or such local organizations. And also, as Anna said, this organizing from the grassroots is a slow process. So longer term funding and patience to see the results is also something that I just like to emphasize and underline.
Andrei, do you want to add something, or shall I go to the next question?
No, I totally, yeah, I wanted to second what Anya said about, I don't know, assuming, recognizing our own faults and oversleeping, as you put it, great. We have spent too much time thinking that a lot of the world is similar to us, and that these basic values that we're trying to propose are a datum, and we don't have to convince anybody of them. But I don't know, things are different. Many people have more important stuff to do. It's our job to explain why these values that we consider important can actually lead to people having better lives. And totally agree with Vera also, and we're happy to be working together in Vera's initiative on that. And yeah, I just wanted to mention, I don't think any of us has mentioned that, at least at European level, our organizations, our three organizations, actually already acted on these issues. For instance, with the rule of law instrument, with the rights and values funds that we pushed for, and there are steps ahead. Of course, they're not solving the problems, but there are stuff that we can do at EU level. But anyway, just wanted to point that.
Okay, I got two more questions. First, it's just for Poland and Hungary, and somebody from Romania is asking how we Romanian NGOs could help you in this very serious situation of being threatened and civil society being blamed as a foreign agent and so on. What do you think we could do more?
Well, I think you're doing quite a lot. As you said, in the introduction, we've been cooperating for quite a while. I think exchange of information is very important. As you said, the authoritarian regimes learn from one another and get inspiration from one another. So it's important to see what exactly is happening in the various countries. And to be prepared when it may come to your country. And I think also showing solidarity towards one another is also very important. So for example, in spring 2017, when the Hungarian parliament discussed this foreign funded legislation, a petition by Civil Society Europe was signed by like 500 civil society organizations from across the continent. And of course, this didn't change the outcome of the legislation. However, for us in Hungary, it was very important to feel the solidarity of like-minded organizations from across the whole continent. And in this, I think we should continue. And maybe a third thing is to work together towards the European Union, so that the European Union would be also more proactive in supporting civil society. And here I not only mean financial support, which is of course very important, but also political support from the EU institutions and cooperation in countering shrinking civil space. So we together as civil society should work towards that. And we do.
Anna?
You can do a lot, and of course, thank you for the things you are already doing for us. So first of all, you can like this is the case of this LGBT ideology-free zones. I say free LGBT ideology because it's also important that the ideology was they called ideology for expecting and fighting for rights. That's also like very cruel in this sense. It's not. But anyway, going back to this case, so many so now we have over 100 governments, local governments, municipalities that adopted this legislations. Like thanks to the foreign like protests from the foreign countries, like it has stopped. So no long so there are no more government municipalities that adopt this kind of law, and those who did, they are now hesitating to take it out. Not because of Polish courts that said that it's against the constitutions, not because sometimes of the protests of local communities. By the way, some kind of these municipalities there are called civic deserts, so there were no NGOs to protest there, so that's why it was very easy to adopt. But thanks to municipalities from abroad, and also Romanian municipalities are so if you could encourage Romanian municipalities who are in partners with Polish municipalities to tell them, hey guys, it goes too far, we don't do it, it's against human rights legislations all around the world, because the foreign audience is still very strong. The voice of the let's say abroad is still strongly heard in Poland, sometimes more than the local community. So what you can do is this is one thing. The second is that we both have active citizens found programs, so you can build coalitions with Polish organizations and submit projects together. We are now opening in about like a few weeks a new call for proposal for thematic area, so feel invited for coalitions and cooperations with Polish organizations. Your examples, how you, for example, your good practices, your experiences, work here in Poland, and we expect your let's say your support, solidarity, but also your know-how and your knowledge and experience in this field.
Thank you. And now, very, very brief, we have a last question. It's regarding the challenging environment and context, and how could some priorities be achieved between donors and civil society. And we are asked to name 3 or 4 key recommendations or priorities to identify in the work between civil society in our region and donors, but just name it 3 or 4 if you have. Andrei, would you like to start?
Yeah, I don't work in the donor side of my organization, so I'm just going to push for the importance of flexible funding. That's super important for NGOs to be able to quickly react, use their funding to quickly react to the challenges around them, because we've seen how
kind of rapid response funds that we have on citizens.
Yes, funds as flexible as you can get.
Well, I think I said it already, the 4 C's: coalitions, communication, constituency, and communities. These are the areas that should be supported and where donors and organizations should cooperate to improve. And just one sentence to underline very strongly that as regards communication, it's very important that we, the society, build our own narratives, talk about our own importance, our own work, our own regards, instead of responding to the attacks, because that strengthens their narrative.
Mm-hmm. Coalition, I think, is very, very important, because if we're not together and trying to find consensus and then fight for all these values, then we'll be an easy target for all these governments and unfriendly parliament. Anna, what would be your 3 or 4 priorities?
Dialogue in and unexpected coalitions. I would say even reach those audience that wasn't there, and radicalization, so to not end up in like really polarized areas. And the third would be the also like the international partnerships, as I invited you to build coalitions with Polish organizations, also try to maybe reach other countries like Belarus, and because we need this international interest. And I'm so happy that we now can discuss in this 3 countries areas, but I think that our region needs to also like be in a more regular contact with each other. Thank you very much.
One more thing that I want to add, it's how important for some organization like Resource Center, National Federation, to keep or to develop their convener role, convening among civil society, and then to try to put civil society in dialogue, constant dialogue. Although sometimes we are not on the same side with this government, but to keep the dialogue and to try to press them to stay there and to hold the center. Because at the end of the day, I think what we aim during this period is to hold the center in our countries in order to keep them on a democratic path and towards a European Union. Inside the European Union. Andrei, a very short intervention.
A very quick point, capitalizing on what Vera said about the importance of narrative. I think while maintaining perfectly independent from all political parties and keeping an open mind with being able to talk with any of the political parties, we have to know our politics. With us as civil society, we have to understand why are people voting the way they're voting, why are they bringing to power governments who are ready to dismantle us, you know? Why has Trump came to power? Why have politicians come to power in Romania who are ready to dismantle the independence of justice? You know, when we understand that, we have a better grasp of how to place the values that we work for in the mind and in the agenda of the people around us, because otherwise we risk of becoming irrelevant.
Okay, so Andrei, I think we are done with the time, right? We said that we'll finish at 1 o'clock Romanian hour, 12 o'clock Central and Eastern Europe time. Just to mention to you that in terms of our index, we are planning to send a letter with the results to all the members of the current parliament, and probably to the next parliament after December if we'll have elections. And also we'll continue the work that we are doing it now at the level of Central and Eastern Europe and in Brussels, because I think this will help on the long term. And yeah, I hope next year, when we will discuss about the next index, we'll have more reasons to be let's say optimists about the future of our democracies. So thank you so much, Vera and Anna. Thank you, Andrei, for putting this together. Thank you to my colleagues that are behind the screens, Simona Constantinescu and Laurențiu and Juliana. So all the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.